Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Paul Heinrich. I will be chairing this meeting, the Development Committee of North Norfolk District Council this morning. For anyone who hasn't attended one of these meetings before, the officers who provide and present our reports and offer technical advice sit either side of me. The top table. In front of me in the central area sit the members of the committee who will be making decisions on the items on the agenda. Could I ask officers to introduce themselves, please?
Good morning, my name is Jeff Lyon. I'm a development manager.
Good morning, my name is Russell Stock. I'm a team leader.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Gregory, Democratic Services Officer.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Philip Rice and I'm the Assistant Director of Planning here at North Norfolk.
Hello, my name is Nikki Debbage. I'm the Housing Strategy and Delivery Manager.
I'm Fiona Croxton, Solicitor to the Council.
Thank you. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. We're not expecting a fire alarm today or any drills of such. So if the alarm does sound, it is for real. So please follow officers using the marked exits. Make your way to the assembly points in the car park at the front or the area at the rear of the building by the flagpole. Do not use the lift. Could you please ensure that mobile phones are off? Serial offenders included, please. Thank you. If we are still going at 11, coffee will be provided. I hope we're not, but we never know. I would remind members of the public that they should not speak to councillors during the meeting or at the coffee break. I would assume we will not need lunch, but we never know. Toilets are out in the foyer opposite the lift. Okay, move to the agenda in detail. Item 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Grove-Jones, Councillor Mancini-Boyle and Councillor Varley.
Substitutes?
For substitutes, we have Councillor Harry Blathwaite present as a substitute for Councillor Varley and Councillor Butikofer S present as a substitute for Councillor Grove-Jones.
Thank you. Right, we have minutes of the meeting of 26th of January. I take it you have all read them. Are there any matters that need correction in those minutes, please? Or are we happy? Thank you. You got that, Lauren? With those very minor corrections, are we content to approve them? Show of hands, please. Thank you. Are there any items of urgent business? Okay. Oh, we got two. We have two meetings. How have I managed to miss the second one? Yeah. I should have made clear we're taking both sets of minutes on together. Thank you. Okay, in the order of business, we will run as shown in the agenda. Declarations of interest. I have to declare an interest in the second item, West Runton, in that I have a non-pecuniary interest as a long-standing member of the Caravan of the Home Club. I'm well versed in their sites and mode of operation. I also believe many of us have had a lobbying letter in relation to the first item, Holt RV 220308. So, to that item. Holt RV 220308, variation of conditions 2 and 24 of planning reference PF/17/1803 to amend plans to reflect updated on-site affordable housing provision 0% and to update previously approved land contamination report land rear of 67 Hempstead Road, Holt, Norfolk, for Hopkins Homes Limited. Chair. Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. This application, when submitted by the applicants in February 2022, originally sought to reduce the on-site provision of affordable housing from the approved 23 units to 18. This would have comprised of 10 section 106 secured dwellings, whilst the applicants intended to use grant funding to provide the further 8 dwellings. In October 2022, the applicants submitted revised proposals which sought to reduce the on-site affordable housing to 0. The applicants highlight the increase in costs between their 2 viability assessments, confirming that the total increase in the overall design and construction cost was 1.6 million over the intervening period, with 436,000 of this figure solely due to ongoing inflation in base material costs, and a further 760,000 due to increased abnormal costs. These abnormal costs include higher earthwork, associated servicing, and foundation costs. The remaining is then split between increases to other non-base materials, labour costs, preliminaries, design and contingencies costs. Overall, the applicant has put forward that the scheme as proposed would result in approximately £1.5 million viability deficit. All of these details have been set out within the applicant's viability assessment. As part of the consideration of the proposals submitted by the applicant, the council's housing and planning teams instructed SMB Property Consultancy, a qualified viability assessor, to undertake a review of the applicant's viability case. Having undertaken this review, the outcome of the applicant's assessments were agreed, with sufficient evidence provided to demonstrate that the proposed development would not be sufficiently viable to support the delivery of affordable housing. The viability assessor has recommended that a review mechanism be introduced into any amended/new legal agreement to seek to secure payments towards affordable housing provision should the agreed minimum returns be improved upon. In respect to the applicant's proposal to vary condition 24 relating to land contamination, the updated reports submitted have been considered by the Environmental Protection Team, who raised no objection, subject to securing these updated reports through conditions. As set out within the report for item agenda number 8, both local and national planning policy, along with relevant guidance and case law, make it clear that viability issues can form a material planning consideration. It is disappointing that we are now looking at an application to remove all affordable housing from this development, particularly given that it was only in 2021 that the original application was granted permission and would have seen the delivery of 23 much needed affordable homes within Holt. However, the evidence submitted by the applicants has been found sound, and for the reasons set out within the report, having due regard to the implications of paragraph 11 of the NPPF, the recommendation before you today is one of approval. In terms of updates since the publication of the report, a letter of objection has been received from Duncan Baker MP, written in conjunction with Councillor Georgie Perry-Warnes and Councillor Eric Vardy. This letter doesn't raise any new material planning matters which haven't been already covered in the report. However, it does highlight the MP and councillors' disappointment in the proposals and the impacts it would have on Holt, issues which are understood by officers and which are covered within the report. Following discussions with the legal officer, it may be necessary, should the recommendation be agreed, to complete a new Section 106 agreement for this application rather than a deed of variation to the original as set out in the original recommendation. This doesn't materially change the recommendation, as either way the legal agreement would be required to secure the relevant obligations and requirements. Finally, a late letter of objection was received this morning. The contents of this letter relate to matters which have been covered within the report before you today, including the loss of affordable housing and matters relating to the applicant's financial position. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes. And Lauren has her timer ready, I believe.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. When the original application was heard, there is no doubt that the promise of 45% affordable housing was a key element in gaining permission. There is now no doubt whatsoever that the loss of 23 affordable homes from this development would be nothing short of an absolute travesty. Holt has recently lost a damaging number of affordable houses. To have this happen again would be unconscionable. To say that feelings are running high about the attempt to be released from a firm agreement is a huge understatement. The lack of the submission of a viability assessment in the original application and the presentation of a viability assessment much later in order to obtain a massive alteration in the agreed permission has to be questioned. The point that cannot be debated is that the contamination of the long buried rubbish pit goes back many years and is very well known. However, the result of testing would not have changed with any significance between 2020 and today, let alone to the degree that we're being asked to assume. Holt does not deserve to be punished again for something that is blatantly unjust and materially extremely dangerous to our desired growth plan. Holt is already on the unwanted journey to becoming an unhealthy community. This is a factual analysis in planning terms, i.e. there is a loss of balance. We are losing our natural diversity, in particular that of age and wealth. We must maintain a strong generation of people of working age among our population. Now more than ever, people need to live in sensible proximity to their jobs, and we cannot achieve this without appropriate local housing. Our housing infrastructure cannot be changed in a short-term fix in the future. Once built, it's all we've got. The pattern is here to see in Holt, and the prices are far too high. We need to look at the larger picture, that of a whole town and its future, under your authority and your care. The tangible need for affordable housing must be realistically acknowledged and specifically in situ. We do not believe that this request is justifiable in Holt. Hopkins now wish to remove the very substance of the agreement that won the planning permission in the first place. This simply cannot be endorsed. We put to you that there are only two possible ways forward that can be acceptable. The original planning permission is maintained with the agreed for affordable housing, or the developer starts his construction when he considers his profit margin sufficient to include the affordable homes to be built. This delay is the only tolerable agreement which could possibly be considered ethical or reasonable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have no objecting speakers registered and interestingly, no supporting speakers registered. Goes to the local member, Councillor Perry Warnes. Are you over there?
Thank you, Chair. Hear, Councillor Pryor. When permission for the development of 52 houses was granted in June 2021, the provision of 23 affordable homes was a crucial element of the decision to approve. Holt has plenty of market homes, but there is an identified need for affordable housing to serve the needs of Holt families to live and work in their hometown. The principle of development on this site was established with the much needed affordable homes. If this application is approved, Holt will receive no affordable homes on this development. Would the original permission have been granted if that had been proposed then? I do not think so. The requested variation of the condition, if approved, would mean a new planning permission is effectively granted under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. So why would we agree to having no affordable homes provision now and not then? I propose that the original condition should remain in place and that this application is refused. It is well known that construction comes with a downside risk as well as an upside opportunity, and when such losses occur, they should be retained by the contractor or the scheme should be put on hold until the figures add up. Hopkins Homes now claims that the scheme is not viable with the affordable homes provision. However, no viability assessment was put forward by Hopkins Homes at the time of the initial application, in which case paragraph 58 of the NPPF assumes that applications are viable. Holt is a high value district, and if this site is unviable, what does that mean for other proposed developments in North Norfolk? Nonetheless, an independent assessor has now verified that Hopkins Homes would incur a loss unless the affordable homes are built and sold at market prices. Planning guidance is that the weight given to a viability assessment is a matter for the decision maker. And I ask that it is not given sufficient weight to justify Holt losing its desperately needed affordable housing. I ask for an open book assessment of Hopkins Homes' profit margin on this development under paragraph 58 of the NPPF. I also take no comfort from the assurance that there will be payment of commuted sums should Hopkins Homes exceed the 17.5% agreed profit, given this history. Paragraph 11 of the NPPF says that permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. I strongly contend that the impact of the loss of much needed affordable homes on the people of Holt significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits of protecting Hopkins Homes' profit margin. Who are these extra market houses being built for? North Norfolk has the second highest percentage of second homes in the country, so we can safely assume that it is not for the families of Holt who cannot afford them. I ask North Norfolk District Council and Hopkins Homes to review their stance. Please wait until the development can be built profitably with the affordable homes provision. Please go back to the drawing board and cut your coat according to your cloth if that is what is needed. Just don't cut the affordable homes provision. I share the level of outrage that has been expressed by many people in Holt that the provision of affordable homes is being treated as an optional extra by Hopkins Homes. We need to send a clear message that it is not. This is a matter of social justice. It is a fight for fairness. I ask you to reject this application.
Thank you. Before we move on, just a word from the chair that I know many of us have strong views on this application. I need to remind you that, as with all applications, we are bound to consider it on its merits within the constraints of planning law, the NPPF, and our own policies, and I will seek guidance as necessary from officers on those matters. Should you consider yourself to be predetermined on the matter, rather than simply predisposed, then I would expect you to state as such and to abstain in any vote on the officer recommendation. It may be that you consider that information before you is currently not adequate to enable a reasoned decision to be made. If that's the case, then if anybody wishes to propose a deferral, please be specific as to the additional information that is required. Before we move into the formal debate, could I ask Officer Lyons just to explain for members and for those watching and the public present, how is it that developers and landowners are apparently entitled to a guaranteed level of profit of 17.5%? Difficult for most businesses to obtain these days, regardless of the basis on which any original planning permission was granted, including the provision of affordable housing. It seems curious that they have entitlement above normal businesses. And, I'm sure there are various reasons why, which we might like to hear. Thank you.
Into it. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky area for all authorities dealing with matters of viability, because the ground rules for how we assess viability, it's not all in our gift or our control. There are rules that have been set out by government and by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So there's guidance about how you should assess viability in planning. And government have indicated to developers that the government will allow developers to expect a return on their development of between 15 and 20%. Whereas in the past, those assessments of profit return was based on risk. So the higher the risk, the higher the return, as you would expect in normal business. But by the government stating in the planning practice guidance and via the NPPF that in effect developers should expect to see a level of return between 15 and 20%, it's set in the ground a basis for developers to undertake their assessments. So if they're not getting that return, they can come back to the local council and say, I'm sorry, my development isn't viable. Can I not contribute to this or not contribute to that? So the ground rules have been set out by central government, and obviously we have to work within those rules. Now, the RICS guidance is the last version was dated March 2021, and that sets out the parameters, the information that's needed as part of a financial viability assessment. So those applications where authorities have challenged developers, they've gone to the planning inspectorate. The planning inspectorate will follow the RICS guidance and the rules that the government has set out. So we are fairly constrained. I mean, we as officers aren't comfortable about losing this amount of affordable housing. If we had a choice, we'd say, no, we don't like it. But the rules have been set out by government and we have to work within that framework. Otherwise, we'd run the risk of losing an appeal and having a cost award against us. So that's why we're recommending to you as a council that we approve this application. Although we don't like it, we think we have no choice but to do that.
Thank you. I hope that clarifies matters. Before I shall open to members of the committee, Councillor Fredericks as Cabinet portfolio holder for housing may speak.
Thank you, and thank you committee for allowing me to speak on this subject. I'm Cabinet holder for housing and benefits in North Norfolk. The applicant applied for this original scheme in 2017. They said in 2020 they were confident they could build out the scheme. They've approached NNDC 18 months ago saying that this development wasn't viable for their promised allocation of affordable homes. They didn't wait for an answer. Since then, they've come back 15 times to appeal against planning conditions on the original application. Surely this isn't just an application for the condition to be changed. This is a brand new planning application. Now they've come back again when materials, etc., have risen significantly. Interest rates are also higher. The housing market has stalled, saying again that they cannot build any affordable housing as this scheme is not viable. Our independent consultant says the same. Why wait until this scheme is totally unviable? They knew this 18 months ago. Why watch the prices of suppliers rise until they could apply again? To make sure their case for a zero affordable housing couldn't be denied. Instead, they want the site to be completely made up of market price houses, giving them 100% increase in profit at the expense of affordable homes. These market price homes of an average of £300,000 does not add any benefit. In fact, I'd argue the opposite to the people of North Norfolk. Those who in North Norfolk are being denied the opportunity of living and working in their own communities. Our wages to price of homes is 1 to 10 ratio. Even if a couple were on a good salary, they would still have to raise 10 times their salary to buy one of these homes. Mortgage companies will only lend you 4. Developers have a history of reneging on affordable homes quotas, offering an uplift clause, which is totally useless. If they gave us £1 million, how many houses would that build? How much land would that build? It would not equate to the value of the loss of those affordable homes for local need. We have a crisis in North Norfolk, a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, which is caused by greed, not need. Our beautiful district is being taken advantage of the rich yet again. I would rather not have a block of houses built with no benefit to the communities of North Norfolk. What happens when they need cleaners, when they need people to work in supermarkets, when they need doctors, dentists, nurses, healthcare workers? They're not going to be around. What happens when these people want to go to a restaurant and they're waiting an hour and shouting at the maitre d' because we don't have the staff that can work and live in their communities? The council and I, as portfolio holder, are proud to work with developers that want to invest in our local communities. If there are any watching, please come and see us. We don't want people to use us and our land just for their profits and take away homes from the people of North Norfolk. It stops here now. There has been no negotiation regarding using the S106 money to reduce the cost of building the affordable homes. Why not? I echo the thoughts of Councillor Perry-Warnes and Councillor Pryor that they should defer this until they can actually build the affordable homes. This application wouldn't have got through in the first place if the allocation of affordable homes wasn't offered. They know what they're doing. We have 75 homeless households in North Norfolk. The majority of those people will be in bed and breakfast for 18 months. Over 550 home households, not people, on our urgent housing list. Over 2,500 households on our housing list. So I think they should have a good look at themselves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go into debate now. I'll bring Officer Debbage and others in as appropriate. We'll see if things are going. Who wants to start off? Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was a very powerful speech by Councillors Pryor and Perry-Warnes. I have to say, I've read through these papers backwards and forwards. I'm not convinced by the viability report. These are experienced developers. They knew there was a scrapyard on that site. They've either overpaid for the land or they've miscalculated the building costs. Either way, that's not the fault of the council. I'd be interested to see the letter from the MP. I'm sad it hasn't been circulated to the development committee because that could have been helpful. I'm not saying it isn't, but I would like to see a copy at some point. Do we actually need these market houses in Holt? I think Councillor Fredericks made a very good point. We have the oldest demographic in the country. These houses are probably going to be sold to people retiring from outside the area. Eventually, they're going to need care. They're going to need plumbers. They're going to need people to service their property. To have no affordable housing is, I think it's immoral. I'm very disappointed to see no representatives from the developers here today to try and put their case. To me, it smacks of desecration of duty. I'm sorry, I understand the legal implications here, but I will not be able to vote to approve this application. I'm so disappointed that they've taken this course of action. Sorry to say.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at what everybody has said today because the structure and the format of the application keeps changing. So I address myself to the points that have been discussed, which is what we should be doing. My position on low-cost housing is well known. And I was very upset to get the letter the other day. And obviously looking at the history of the proposed so-called warnings and earmarks from the developer, say he's taken 15 approaches 18 months ago. I cannot see in this age and day of a council that is supposed to help everybody can even think about allowing a development of no low-cost housing within it. However, I understand what the officers are saying, that there is a legal precedent and a legal framework to follow. So, and in the past, before I wrap, we have been bold enough to stop developers. I'll give you Indigo. We had a long-running dispute with Gladman where I don't think the inspector got it right because he said both sides are right. So it proves the viability and the robustness of our case. Holt is in very great danger, in my belief, of becoming Wells Mark II, and Wells made the national television the other day because locals can't afford to buy any houses or live in it because it's full of people from outside. I am from outside. I came here in 1990, but I bought one house to live here. And I've stayed here ever since. So what am I saying? I can see the merits of a development, but it's got to have low-cost housing. We do need local required housing for local people's requirements. I hate the word needs. It sounds like you're handing out from the government when really we're trying to give people a hand up. So I do propose, having listened to you, Mr. Chairman, I think we should defer, because at the end of the day, if you ask me for a decision now, it's going to be no. So therefore, let's leave a path open. It may cost us a bit more. It may be a bit more lengthy, but material prices will change. We're hearing that the gas is coming down. We're hearing that other things are going to change. This high price cycle isn't going to last forever. So if we delay and ask for a deferral, maybe then it brings more strength to our case in a year, 18 months' time. At the end of the day, surely that's got to be the best way forward, because it means that we have a path to the developer. But more importantly, if the developer that's listening to other people can be more open and more constructive, we both might get the result that we so desperately crave. So I ask for I propose a deferral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. If you wish to take that further, and you second that, we need some very clear grounds for requesting a deferral.
Right. Okay. First of all, material prices did go up very high. The price of land has changed. The housing market has come down and starting to level off. We are not saying no to a proposed development. However, we are giving the developer a chance to reappraise the appraisal in conjunction with us, instead of standing off from a distance, i.e. even today, and not appearing to support their application for a variation. Surely that's got to be something worth looking at. And at the end of the day, we want the houses. So we're entering into hopefully a situation in a legal framework that says, look, we want you to build these, but we need those local houses for local people, because we've got over 2,500 families waiting. And that's not going to go down either. I mean, we want 23 here. By the time they're built, there's going to be another 153 possibly on the housing list. We can never win, but we've got to try. So therefore, I ask for a free legal framework under whatever agreement can be done for a deferral. Because if we say no, we could be in default. If we say yes, we're breaking our own code. So we've got to look at this, and I ask them that way. Maybe I can have some advice from the solicitor or from our project manager. But I ask for that deferment in common sense, because I think that's the only viable way forward. We cannot afford to have a closed road to the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we take it any further, Officer Ricing wishes to come in.
Chairman, thank you very much. Good morning, members. I speak to offer advice, not to direct, please. That's very much what I'm doing today. I think everybody is disappointed to be here today and to be having to make this difficult consideration. My reason for asking the chairman to speak is this. The planning application itself has an extension of time period agreed until I believe the 3rd of March with our case officer. I've received an email this morning from Jonathan Lieberman, who represents Hopkins as their head of planning. Jonathan has written to me this morning to update that, having discussed this matter internally with the team at Hopkins, that they would express a wish for a decision to be made today rather than a deferral. I mentioned this email, Chairman, simply because of the fact that obviously if we go beyond the 3rd of March today, the officers would have to negotiate an extension of time to cover any period to negotiate, discuss and come back to members with any revised proposals. If we have to do that, the council would be at risk of an appeal against our determination by Hopkins at any time after an extension of time period had expired or could not be renegotiated. Now, Chairman, I can't tell you this morning that Hopkins will not agree an extension of time. I can only tell you what the email says, Chairman. The email says that the preference is for a decision today. But I would give you my considered professional opinion that the council after the 3rd of March, unless an extension were agreed, would be at risk of an appeal against non-determination, which would take this decision away from this committee and would leave you in a position potentially where you are at risk after the 3rd of March. Unfortunately, I can tell you no more than that.
Thank you. That's clarified that point. Before, could I ask Officer Debbage to just explain the rationale on the viability studies and potential of the proposed, what's it called, an uplift clause?
Okay, so the viability studies are undertaken where we have an application that comes in, or in this case, a variation that comes in that is below policy compliance. So to clarify something earlier about why a viability wasn't undertaken on the original application, they are not, as a matter of course, undertaken where an application comes in that is policy compliant in affordable housing and Section 106 contributions. But with this one, we undertake a review. We employ an independent viability expert who has worked for us now for the past 8 years and who's undertaken a number of viability reviews which have resulted in increased levels of affordable housing or uplift clauses in some cases. He has looked at Hopkins figures. He does not take their figures as a matter of truth. He uses industry comparisons, other benchmark information and expertise that he has to undertake a separate viability assessment, looking at the value of the development in terms of sales and the costs of the development. He doesn't take account of the price that Hopkins have paid for the land. He looks at what a sensible benchmark land value would be and says, if we take the sales values minus the costs including that level of profit for the developer, which Officer Lyons has outlined, and any financing costs, etc. And he takes those two and says, does that leave a sensible land value? And that's what we call residual land value, which is what he's done and undertaken. And he has broadly agreed with the conclusions that Hopkins have come to, that it is not viable and that the costs do not cover, the sales values do not cover the costs, including that profit and the land value. As I say, he doesn't use Hopkins figures, he uses his own figures to draw that conclusion. In terms of the uplift clause, it is something that we have used before, and perhaps ironically, the two main cases we've used it on are also both Hopkins, the North Walsham development and the other Holt developments, where uplift clauses were included in the Section 106 to say, should the position improve, should profits be better than is anticipated at the moment using information we have available to us today, if those profits do increase, then a share of those profits should be returned to the local authority in the form of commuted sums. So Hopkins have paid to us so far £1.4 million of profits. That's 690 from the development at North Walsham and 720 from the development at the previous development at Holt. So they can be a useful mechanism. I completely agree with what Councillor Fredericks has said. They are not as valuable to us as in-hand affordable homes are, but equally they do have a value.
Thank you. So we have a route there which could potentially give some affordable homes, albeit not as many. Thank you. Coming back to Councillor Pearce, I'm not quite sure we had reasons that referral that we're fully acceptable. Could you clarify that before I ask for a seconder?
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask, I did say, can we have any legal advice from the solicitors that can help us on this? Because I think whichever way happens, we're going to get our fingers burnt. And I am exceedingly worried because not of my passion, but because of the need. And that is something we have to look at. We have a legal requirement surely to look after all the people within our boundaries called North Norfolk District Council. So I did ask for some perhaps legal perception.
I will come to that in a moment. Could I just ask Officer Lyons just to go through the reasons referral you've given that they are legitimate in planning terms?
Well, as I understood them, it was a suggestion that the market conditions have changed such that if you did a reappraisal, you might come to a different figure than what Hopkins Homes was suggesting is a viable amount. And I'm not a financial appraiser. I don't know all the ins and outs of all the building costs and things like that. But yeah, clearly things are changing. But the scale of difference between the viability of this project, there's quite a lot of gap between getting into that 15 to 20% profit band that the government say developers should be entitled to receive. So even if conditions did enhance, they still wouldn't take us back into that 15 to 20% window that developers will look for. And again, if we didn't make a decision or if we refused, an inspector would have to make this same assessment. And yes, it might be in a year's time that an inspector assesses it and the conditions may have gone up or they may have gone down even further. They may have changed one way or the other, but we are quite sort of far away from that 15 to 20% window that I'm not quite sure going back and asking for a reappraisal will get us any further to a different answer. Really.
Yeah, I sort of endorse what Jeff says, really. I mean, the housing development must accord with the local plan policies. And one of those policies is obviously H02, which does specify the amount of affordable housing required. And it is a very disappointing application that has come to committee today. And so housing development must accord with the local plan policies unless special circumstances dictate a variance. And those special circumstances can include a lack of financial viability, which is what Hopkins Homes are saying in this instance. Now, there have been cases, appeals, is it quite one, I think it was 2017 in Islington, where Islington Council were backed by an inspector, but there they were very unhappy about the financial viability papers put forward by the developer, and they challenged that, and the inspector backed them. And in fact, the High Court backed the council as well. But in this particular instance, we're getting a very clear indication that independently, the council's assessor has agreed with the viability assessment put forward. So it'd be very, very difficult to raise concerns now about the viability assessment.
Thank you. Could I just ask you to clarify the legal position of the original S106 agreement and how that stands and would stand under any decision now?
Interestingly, in respect of the Section 106 agreement, a council is at liberty to negotiate separate terms on a Section 106 agreement at any time. This Section 106 agreement has only been entered into in May 2021, the one that applies to Hopkins, and it's got clauses in it strong enough that the obligations in that original Section 106 agreement will continue to bite for another 3 years. So if the council wanted to be quite difficult about it, those 3 years, the obligations under there relating to affordable housing will bite. After that, the developer can appeal on the basis that they're no longer reasonable. The difficulty, of course, is that we would just stigmatize the development for 3 years, and it wouldn't prevent Hopkins necessarily appealing under the Section 73 application. There would just be a lot of machinations about the consequences of that for the Section 106 agreement as the appeal was going through. But theoretically, we do bind the developer for the next 3 years under that Section 106 agreement.
Can I just quickly come back?
Right,
Mr. Chairman?
okay, you've had a, sorry, councillor Ayres, you've put a proposal forward. Does that have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Brown. Do you wish to speak on it now?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I speak as a member of an adjoining ward to Holt, so I'm all too well aware of the housing need in Holt. I also speak for purposes of record as the portfolio holder for planning and enforcement with particular interest in ensuring that our local plan policy follows our corporate plan objectives as a council, that we are a plan-led authority and not a developer-led authority when it comes to development in this district. Having said that, I've listened very carefully to what people have already said, pretty much agree with everything that has been said. I do struggle. I realise that there is more on the file that the planning officer has access to than we can see on the public portal. My concern here is the main driver of the change in financial circumstances seems to be the additional cost to remediate the contamination on site from the scrapyard previous use. I don't know if part of that extends into Heath Farm, which has also been developed, where 23% affordable housing has been delivered, funnily enough. I listened to Hopkins Homes having done precisely this on other sites, so there is a pattern of behaviour. This would be, in any legal sense, a breach of contract, which is what a Section 106 agreement is, except, of course, we have government interference. We have government, as it were, permission given to developers to challenge on grounds of viability. Unfortunate, but that is the situation, and we have to live with it and we have to manage it. I don't think we should make the process as straightforward as the absence of representatives from Hopkins Homes would seem to suggest today, and I add my disappointment to that, to what others have said about that. So getting back to the point of what we know, what we may not know, from what we've seen so far, I would like to see a lot more evidence as to why in the space of 9 months between consent being granted in May 20 or whenever it was, and the Section 106 agreement being signed in February 21 or whenever it was, what has changed so rapidly? I haven't seen any evidence from the initial geotechnical report from the land surveyors to the latest one that stands out, in my view, and speaks to me and says there is a serious financial problem. What I do see on Companies House is healthy profits by the applicant and a vacuous statement, and I'll quote, "The company takes its responsibility seriously when it comes to helping local communities." Please restrain your response to that statement. So yes, I am seconding Councillor Kershaw. I'm seconding Councillor Pearce. I think we should defer this, but I have a concern about doing so in this sense. We've heard from the Assistant Director for Planning that we are at risk of an appeal for non-determination. If we defer today, I'd like to know, in terms of the implications for the council, what the difference is between an appeal under those circumstances and us, for example, taking a decision today to refuse, if members feel that they have sufficient information. In terms, what is the risk financially to this council by the, as it were, comparison between the two methods of appeal? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Officer Rowson.
Yeah, Chairman, through you, I need to be very clear. The email content that I read to you was a preference from Hopkins. I gave you my view as to the balance of potential risk that would arise given the extension of time running only to the 3rd of March. This is an option which will be open for Hopkins, and you've heard their preference. I can't tell you today what decision Hopkins will arrive at. I can tell you that I'll speak with them this afternoon, and should your view be for a deferral of the item, then with our case officer, then I can confirm that I will be asking for an extension of time from Hopkins if you choose to defer today. However, I can't guarantee you in the context of that email that you will get a response that will allow the council an extension of time under any deferral. I can say no more than that, Chairman. As to the risk that the council would present, then clearly the developer is seeking a decision to allow them to move forward with their development. There is a chance that we may be facing an appeal against our determination, as we've discussed. If the council were to determine a case and refuse planning permission, the grounds of normal engagement apply. We would have to be reasonable in our consideration if we refuse planning permission on this application today. We would have to give due weight to all of the other aspects that are committed to under the Section 106 in excess of £300,000, Chairman. We can tell you what those benefits are. We can tell you, Chairman, that there is a question about housing land supply in our district and the benefit of delivering new homes under a new planning permission must carry weight. There are a number of issues that you will need to bear in mind should you consider refusing planning permission. If you do all of those things and you express a reasonable view after debate, having considered all of the material considerations, then Chairman, that is within the gift of the decision maker. That is where you will find the planning balance to be. The officer's report is clear as to where we find the balance to be, but the reason we present these cases to committee, and I've directed this case comes to you, is because these are significant concerns, as you've seen from those members of the public attending today and from the town council who are speaking. So the overall balance, Chairman, is one that there is always risk with a planning decision. Our job as advisors to you is to give you advice to enable you to make a reasonable decision on the balance of the evidence that you have in front of you. I'd love to be able to give you a black and white answer, Chairman, but that is the best one I can give for members today.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, as Officer Rowson said about the 5-year land supply position, I mean, that is obviously a significant material change to when we considered it back in December 2020. So obviously that's a changing weight that we give to material consideration. So when you look at paragraph 11D2 of the NPPF, it talks about we should be granting permission for sustainable development unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the NPPF taken as a whole. So it's about how we square those sort of issues up, and obviously the Section 106 contribution is part of making development acceptable. So it's a judgment for the committee whether you think the loss of affordable housing significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. But it's understanding what are the adverse impacts and articulating those in your decision. Not an easy one.
Indeed, we are somewhat in the cleft stick on this. I see no reason to question the independent viability study. The gentleman concerned has undertaken these from many authorities, and that matter should not be reopened. I would question the nature of the contamination and how a company that has held that land for several years was not aware of the extent of that contamination. It does seem unlikely, shall we say. Right, we are debating the proposal to defer now, not the substantive. Who wishes to speak on the proposal to defer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take a slightly different tack. Firstly, I'd like to give some appreciation to officers and understand the difficult position that they're in, and thank them for bringing that with us today and for the advice we're being given. And also, as a separate aside, but that's something I know, if something is policy compliant and we don't do viability, perhaps in the future we should. I don't know the requirements on that, but discussion for another day, but I'd like to raise that point. In planning applications, we always have a bit there that says about human rights implications. It's always there at the front. And often we say, okay, no human rights implications. But I decided to have a read this time. If you can bear with me, I'll get the right picture. Article 8, respect for your private and family life. We need to bring some reality to this. And Councillor Warnes and sorry, I forget the name of the parish councillor, you know, have made it very clear, you know, the effect on people. My wife, who's in this room, works in Councillor Brown's ward, working with people with needs. And she told me on the way here, oh, by the way, I've been working 2 extra shifts this week because there's not enough people, because they have to travel from Norwich because they're not around. And she doesn't get a bonus or an overtime for that. She actually takes a drop in pay to cover that. So she'll leave home at 7:45 in the morning and get home at 10:30 at night. These are the realities. There are not enough people to cover these jobs. So on to my human rights. I acknowledge in Article 8, if I can find it, bear with me. It says about housing, it has a right to a home, but not a house. So I acknowledge it says that in there. However, if I can just get to the right bit. Bear with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Remembering that Councillor Frederick has said that we've got 75, I think it was, in temporary homes. We've got 295 in band 1. This development would have represented 10% of those people on band 1. Okay, so this is a significant number of people that are now not going to have these rights. The concept of a private life also covers your right to develop your personal identity and to forge relationships and other relationships. This includes the right to participate in essential economic, social, cultural and leisure activities in some circumstances. Public authorities may need to help you enjoy your right to a private life, including your ability to participate in society. Are we doing that? Are we allowing that to happen by making people stay in bed and breakfast, to share accommodation, to live with families, to sofa surf? I don't think so. Therefore, a deferment is the minimum. I cannot support this here today. Looking at this and all the things that have been said, I cannot support it. So if the best option we have is a deferment, then I would happily go there. And part of that deferment is to understand that we are complying with human rights, because these people have human rights and we have an obligation, and I don't think we're fulfilling it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else wishing to speak? And you've had your go.
I just wanted to make the point, just wanted to ask the development manager if he agrees with me that it's nutrient neutrality that is the largest threat to whether we have a 5-year land supply or not. And that is an extraneous circumstance in itself, which is nearing, as it were, resolution.
I won't disagree. Nutrient neutrality is having a huge impact on housing delivery. Fakenham is in the area scheme for 950 dwellings, which is being affected by nutrient neutrality. It's not the only factor. I mean, getting enough planning permissions for housing is also a factor there. So the development market will respond to nutrient neutrality, and they may find alternative places to develop other than Fakenham or other places that are in the zone. But yeah, it's certainly a factor. It's affecting 5-year land supply.
Councillor Kershaw, then Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I'm more concerned than I was before, having heard that we've had the Assistant Director of Planning has received an email today, which to me is almost, it feels like a threat. They know the timing, they know where we are, and I think if I was an inspector, I'd look poorly at that timing. So I really feel that the best way forward is a deferment on this. I think it's a risk that we have to take. And I think we're being manipulated by a powerful developer. And if they'd had the courage, they would have come here and sat and fought their case, and they haven't. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
So I'm speaking on the deferment.
We're
I haven't
debating
spoken yet
deferment.
on the substantive motion, which I'd like.
We're debating
to talk
deferment
to
currently.
later. I agree with what councillor Kirsch's just said. It almost getting an email at the last minute like that. It's like the tail wagging the dog, or trying to, and I don't like it. But it does concern me that deferral may risk a non-determination, which is basically a fait accompli. We haven't determined, therefore they can go ahead. Am I right in saying that? No. Can you explain what that means then? So if we can't meet a decision by this date in March, and so we non-determine, what does that mean for this application? Not the council, this application.
I'll touch on this because I think the deferment and the appeal, there is clearly a direct link here. Although we've not had a firm statement saying they will appeal, obviously, as you rightly say, there's an inferment in the way that the message is put across that is an option open to them. Now, if we defer and we go back to the developer and say, look, we'd like to reopen negotiations to try and get something that helps meet the local aspirations for Holt. If the developer says, no, I'm not going to extend your extension of time, they could, once that extension time's lapsed, appeal on grounds of non-determination. So i.e. the district council hasn't issued a developer a decision on their application within the agreed time frame. So they can go to the planning inspectorate and issue an appeal. That doesn't automatically give them permission. It just means that it will be taken out of our hands as a district and will go to a planning inspectorate appointed by the planning inspectorate in Bristol. So that inspector will also have to assess all of these issues like you're assessing today, and will have to come to a view whether he or she agrees with the proposal from the applicant. So it's an appeal just moves the problem a year down the line, given the length of time it's taking inspectors to make decisions at the moment. It's just moving the can down the road. Now, the developers, I understand, has already started on site, so it's not as if they're stopping, but clearly they've given their indication they don't want to be providing this affordable housing because they don't think it's viable. So there's clearly an issue there in terms of them progressing when we've got a legal agreement in place that requires certain things to be done and triggers to be met. So there's an area there of further work required. But from my perspective, in terms of process, so if you were to defer today and the developer says, no, I'm not going to extend your extension of time, the option is open for us to make a decision prior to that extension of time lapsing. So if we go back to the developer and ask for a deferment, ask for the extension of time and get pushed back, then it's a matter for you as a committee, if you wanted to say, if we get that pushback, that we'll make a decision one way or the other, likely on the basis of what people are saying, it would be a recommendation for refusal. But that does have an implication for how an inspector would determine a cost application. Because if we're making a decision saying we disagree with the applicant's position, clearly we've marked our cards and said this is what we think of the application. But it'd be a hard narrative for the applicant to come back and say we've behaved unreasonably when we tried to go back and have a discussion with them to try and negotiate a way out. So I think we'd be the reasonable party if we're trying to resolve this in an amicable way. But an inspector will make that judgment on if Hopkins were to submit a cost appeal. But yeah, it's difficult. But I think unless Fiona has any legal input in terms of the legal implications.
No, I think you sort of summed it up. I mean, it is difficult. A deferral, I mean, insufficient evidence to demonstrate that they can't deliver what is in there. I mean, it's disappointing, I think, that it's such an extreme. They've gone from 45% to naught. No way of trying to find some sort of compromise, which would at least have softened the blow a little bit. I don't know whether you could have some sort of deferment and then potentially an emergency meeting prior to the 3rd of March, depending on Hopkins' reaction to that. Philip will probably know better than myself.
Chairman, at the risk of sounding like the oldest bear in the room, I will tell you this. My experience normally is that if there is an appeal against non-determination, that local authorities will bring back a case for the committee to give a view as to the decision that you would otherwise have arrived at if no extension is granted and that an appeal is lodged. On that basis, this committee could have a voice with the planning inspectorate as to the decision that you would otherwise arrived at if you had no other alternative. The disappointment is that such circumstances remove the decision making from local democracy. It becomes a decision by the planning inspectorate, but it is lawful to appeal against non-determination. We have a developer here who is trying to deliver new homes for this community, and we can speak about the issues should we receive an appeal against non-determination, and we can bring back a report that will carry a view and members will be able to make a decision which is then referred on to the planning inspectorate as to the views that you would otherwise have arrived at if an appeal is lodged. I hope that's clear, Chairman, but it's a wholly unsatisfactory circumstance for everybody. But I do understand the genuine concern in the room today from members of the local community, and I can easily understand why a deferment would be helpful for members in terms of distilling down those areas, and we will go back and we will try to negotiate an extension, but it's right to make you aware of what the circumstances are that surround that.
Thank you. Clearly Hopkins are not going to be stopping work on the site, and not with gangs already there and materials no doubt pre-ordered. So I can't see the site itself stopping. It's purely related to whether they wish to avoid their obligations under the original S106 affordable housing or not. Right, I have, where do I get to? Councillor Withington.
Got a couple of questions really. If I can refer this perhaps to Officer Debbage. On the and it refers to what the solicitors just said as well. On the viability assessment, we've gone on this from, as you say, a large number of homes to 0. On that viability assessment, as part of that, does it report back and say there is a point at which it would become viable at all, say 6 or 7 or something like that? Or does it just look at the entire number of agreed affordable homes and 0? So that's one of my first questions. And the second one, because if we're going to defer, for me, I've been hearing that a large part of this investigation was a heavy weight given to the material consideration of the provision of the affordable homes, and without that, the original would not have gone ahead. Does that work the other way now? If we were deferring and we became into an appeal situation, would that be considered as an adequate material consideration for why we feel it needs to be deferred and the opportunity given for that to come right again? I don't know who answers that.
I can certainly answer the first question in terms of the range of affordable housing. So the answer would be, in normal circumstances, yes. What the viability assessor would look at is policy compliant possible? What is, and yes or no, what is the applicant proposing? Is that reasonable? Yes or no? In this case, when the applicant is suggesting that 0 is not viable, which is effectively what they're doing. They're saying it's not even viable to deliver this development with no affordable housing. So yes, we could have looked at ranges, but that would probably have been a little bit pointless, because if we're saying none is viable, then 2 aren't viable, 3 aren't viable, 4 aren't viable. But in normal circumstances, he would push and say, okay, if you can't deliver policy compliant, let's find a point that you can deliver. And that's the negotiation that he often undertakes on our behalf to increase what an applicant is proposing. As I say, it hasn't been done in this case because the applicant and the figures that the assessor has used have shown that 0 affordable housing is not viable.
So on the other question about and I think it's essentially a planning balance question, isn't it? So you made a planning balance back in December 2021 on the basis of a fully policy compliant amount of affordable housing, and there are other contributions of about £320,000 other contributions. So it was an allocated site, so members rightly made a decision to approve it. Now, had that had 0% affordable housing at the time, you might have come to a different view. Obviously, we can't transport ourselves back to the wonderful time of December 2021, but if we did, obviously, we'd have to make a different balance. We'd have to weigh the benefits against the other. Now, what's happened since that time is that we no longer have a 5-year land supply. So that's a different thing to add into the mix of the planning balance. So actually, if we didn't have a 5-year land supply in December 2020, and there was a 0% proposal, we may be having to apply paragraph 11D of the NPPF and giving weight to sustainable development. So it may well, so it's a hard one to call, isn't it? Because there's things change in the intervening period and might lead to a different conclusion. Obviously, the weight to be apportioned to that is a matter for you as a committee. So you could give more weight to one thing or the other. But I don't think I'm answering your question, but I think it's difficult because
it's useful.
There's so many factors that come into play that change over time.
I'd endorse what Jeff says. I mean, the site's in a sustainable location. There's other extraneous benefits in the Section 106 agreement. I think, Jeff, you sent across this morning a list, didn't you, of the amount of money that is paid under the Section 106, regardless of the or irrespective of the affordable housing obligations. So it is a very, very difficult balance. The 5-year land supply now mitigates against trying to prevent developments in a sustainable location, but it's appreciated the fundamental disappointment about what was offered in respect of the amount of affordable housing and the sheer drop on that. Jeff, have you got that figure for the other things?
So, I mean, there were quite a number of obligations. So it totaled just over £338,000 of different obligations. So there was a healthcare contribution of over 17,500. There was county wildlife site management contributions of nearly £20,000. There was off-site allotments of over 25,000, parks and informal open space of 52,000, 17,500 for a coastal hopper bus contribution. We had 154,000 for education, just under 4,000 for a libraries contribution, and public rights of way and green infrastructure, there's 16,961. So it's not as if we don't have any contributions, it's just the fact that we are losing such a big amount of affordable housing that is the bitter pill that we all have to decide whether we swallow or not. I mean, when you go back and play the YouTube video from the 10th of December and hear what the developer said, it's that they're confident they can deliver a policy compliant scheme. It's you do have to ask what's happened, but so our advice is that we have to work within the legal framework of a financial viability assessment, and that's really why our recommendation still is to approve it, bearing in mind the cost implication for not doing so.
It's a really difficult one, as we've all said, and I actually think in some ways a deferment is just kicking the can down the road. I think we need to be bold and brave on this one, actually. I think we need to stick to our guns. And yes, we don't have the 5-year land supply that we should have. And why is that? Because of a policy that was dumped on us that has caused that to happen. Nutrient neutrality. That's not through our doing. That's not through the residents of North Norfolk's doing. That's through external parties. I'm going to avoid being political here. And so for me, I remember that application because at the time I happened to represent Holt, and I sat in on the debate and listened to it. And one of the reasons that it was very, very one way or the other was because of the access via the Hempstead Road and the impact it would have on those people that lived on that road. And at the time, we said, you know, we already have a huge problem with the traffic on that road and we are adding to it. But we were prepared because of the 23 houses to accept it, because we also realised that actually having no house is worse than having a noisy house. You might disagree if you lived on the Hempstead Road. So for me, I would support a deferment over a refusal, an acceptance. But I wonder whether actually a deferment is the way to go. I think we need to be brave. There's lots and lots of other points I would make here. The business about the money, that we could get the money coming in, if they decide that they can make some money out of the site after all. Well, that money doesn't help the people of Holt necessarily. In fact, it's highly unlikely to help the people of Holt because of the cost of the land there. So the money would go somewhere else in the district, which, okay, helps other residents. But the people of Holt need their homes so that they can stay there, so that they can be working in their local communities. And I think that was put very well by the portfolio holder when she explained the implications. So for me, I don't disagree with the deferment, but I think, are we just deferring a problem because we have to be big and brave? And that is, that's difficult. But there are times you have to stand up for what is right. And that is what we're here for. Thank you.
Councillor Holloway.
Thanks, Chairman. As I must say, rather unusually, I'm going to agree with Councillor Boutokova. As an ex-GP in Holt, I know it very well, and it desperately needs affordable housing. It's changed so much over the last 60 years. I've known it from a child, and it's full of large houses with people, incomers, second homes, and the people who work in Holt or work close to Holt, or people who live in my village and work in Holt, have nowhere to live, and it desperately needs the affordable housing. And I think the deferment's only worth doing if we get something positive out of it. I can't quite see the point of it unless we get half the number of affordable houses, or if that's what we have to do, but I'd rather refuse it actually, don't be my preference.
Officer Lyons wishes to come in.
I'm thinking on my feet here, so I'm but if let's say members decide to defer and go back for negotiation with Hopkins, and Hopkins said no, there's no room to budge here on the 0%. We can't provide any affordable under Section 106. I mean, this is probably something that Nikki wants to listen to as well, in terms of if we've talked about money's already coming in from Hopkins Homes from their sites on Cromer Road. So there's a pot of money there that presumably needs to be spent somewhere in Holt to deliver affordable housing. I suppose the question is, can we have a negotiation with the developer about providing those homes using that money on the site? So you could actually deliver those homes on the site. Maybe Hopkins Homes take it in themselves to offer them at a lower price than they would normally sell them. So you actually get some way of delivering housing on the site, using the monies that we've secured from other developments via the uplift clause. So it's not beyond us. It's going a bit out of the sphere of what we would normally do as a planning authority, but sometimes if you don't ask the question, you don't get, do you, in life? So actually, if we can have a positive discussion with Hopkins Homes about what can we achieve, if we can't get anything through the Section 106, what can we do elsewhere to get affordable housing on that site? So that's my idea. I mean, it may not have any legs, but just think if we're going to go back and have a discussion with Hopkins, let's talk about everything, not just one thing that we could agree with them.
Thank you. Useful. Councillor Toy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So can I just be clear? Because obviously I see if that's the option we have to take, deferment, but actually I think we should be brave as well. And I think dearly I would like to say no, but I'm trying to find a way through the system. So what my question is now is the process. If we say no, we don't accept this, you're going to ask us for a reason. Is that correct? And so that's the challenge that I'm now going to ask you to help us find that reason. We need your advice on that, because I think my reading of the room, and certainly it's where I would sit, would be my preference. I'm happy to work through the system to see if we can get something from it, would be to say no, because this is significantly different. And now Councillor Boutokova says, I remember sitting there and we talked about the highways and how it was acceptable, and this is not acceptable, and we wouldn't have approved it. So I'd like to know, we've talked about the deferment and the possible things for that and the extension of time and the consequences. What happens if we say no? And whilst I accept hard, maybe hard, it's not impossible. So if I could have some advice on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So,
Chairman, I'm going to ask the committee clerk for a little advice here. We've got a proposal on the table with a seconder. I would be offering some professional advice about, with respect to members and that request, that we may be entering into a situation if we defer, that if we start to debate reasons to refuse, that may be considered prejudicial to any decision that we might reach under the request for deferral. So if I could perhaps deflect and defer to advice from our committee clerk, I think that might be helpful to ensure whatever decision we reach today is going to be unfettered. Thank you.
Thank you. Members should be discussing the substantive motion for deferral, unless the members wish to withdraw their deferral on their motion. We need to discuss that first and foremost and vote on that before any further consideration.
I was considering starting the answer to that problem. I thought it was a valid question and we might wish to have an answer to it.
I think it's relevant to the deferral, whether we support the deferral or not. We need to know what the other options are available to us. So thank you for that advice from officers, but I'm not looking to change that at this time. I'd like to know what the options are and what the consequences are, because if we're going to go for deferral, we need to be able to understand what the other options are as well. So thank you.
I would agree.
I'm sure Officer Ralston will kick me if I say something out of turn in terms of so I suppose the question then is, if a deferral, if you're going back for a deferral, I suppose it's understanding what is it you're asking the developer to do. So you need to be clear what you're deferring to be provided by the developer or ourselves as officers that you don't currently have. So if it's a reappraisal or a reassessment of the figures that they provided, or it's other information that might help explain the change in circumstances between December 20 or June 2021 when the 106 was signed and now, that help you understand why that information wasn't presented to you when you were determining it last time. So I think that understanding and that clarity about what's changed is obviously important as part of the narrative of accepting a reduction. And also, as I said, the opportunity to discuss other alternative solutions to help deliver public benefit, because at the end of the day, we're here to deliver public benefits as a committee, and affordable housing is probably one of the biggest public benefits we need to deliver. So it's exploring the other options. If we can't deliver any on site via the 106 route, what are the alternatives we could work towards delivering public benefit? Now, in terms of a refusal, I mean, that's the area where we're going to get into a sticky wicket if we start discussing precisely what our grounds for refusal would be, if that's what you wanted to do. I mean, clearly you're unhappy with their conclusions, but it's evidencing what are the specific factors in their financial viability appraisal that you disagree with. Because it's one thing just to make an assumption that something's wrong, it's being able to then evidence it as to what is the thing that's wrong that an inspector would need to be directed to consider in an appeal, because that's where it would end up, is in an appeal situation. So I think I'll leave it at there unless Mr. Ralston wants to add anything more on refused matters.
Nothing further to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kershaw, you've already had one go at this, so be
Really.
brief, please.
We are in the process of resolving the nutrient neutrality situation. So if we had a deferral and it takes time, there's a better position with the 5-year land supply, which could work in our favour. And I just wanted clarity, now that we're at stage 19 with the new local plan, how does that affect us with the 5-year plan? Is that not more going towards a 4-year land supply?
I think that's where the NPPF and the levelling up bill is heading towards, but it's not there yet. I suppose it's a matter of judgment as to whether we have that 4-year land supply, and I suppose it's a matter for understanding, is it entirely all down to nutrient neutrality is why we don't have a 5-year land supply? Those are sort of discussions that we'd have to consider and work out whether that is definitely the case. I think I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I just want to add my support to what's been said by my colleague Councillor Holiday, Councillor Butikofer, and I think Councillor Toy. I don't think we should be deferring this application today. I think we should be voting this down. To be honest with you, I think Hopkins are treating the people of Holt with pure and utter contempt with their plans here. I think the way they've gone about this is wrong. I think we need to send them a message. I think we need to say to them, no, this is not how you treat our residents. We will support the people that we are here to represent. We will support them by trying to leverage affordable homes for them. I think I'm in quite a rare position here, obviously being so young, 23. I don't own my own house. The chance of me being able to buy property in the district that I live, the district that I help to represent, is at the minute a far-flung dream. We need to do all we can to ensure affordable housing comes forward, and to lose so many in one hit, I think, is a dreadful thing. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I think we need to come to a vote on the deferral. I'll give Councillor Pearce just a very brief final comment as he proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I did say before I proposed the deferral that if you asked me for your decision today, it would be no. What I was putting for the deferral was not to put us into a cleft stick situation, and bear in mind what a legal advice was, that we still have some pull for 3 years on the S106 agreement. Could we not use that time to open discussions and go down a gradual rundown or whatever options that we've got to offer? Because you say, if you asked me for a decision today, I would agree no. But I was trying to be practical and trying to be logical and trying to get somewhere, because I don't want to lose 45% of the houses. I don't want to lose a house at all. And to be faced with a bullet like this, I think is disgusting. But at the same time, I was trying to help us to get something if we're not going to get nothing, because of all the other legal ramifications.
Is this a new point, Sarah?
It's an important point. And that is, if we're going to go for a deferral, and I'm going to vote on whether we have a deferral or not, I need to understand on what grounds we're going for a deferral, please. Because if it's on the financial viability, that's been done by an independent person. So I want to understand why I would vote for a deferral. I'm just trying to be exact, sorry, but I think it's important because it's such an important decision.
I would tend to agree. I'm still somewhat obscure as to the grounds you put forward, Councillor Pearce. If you could repeat them and.
Okay. Nobody wants to lose the 45% housing. There's low cost. There has been, as we were informed, 15 or so attempts to get this reduced. We are hit with an ultimatum of nothing from 45%. Surely that is harm to the public, because it's not helping our housing association. It's not helping, our housing requirements.
Could I stop you there, Councillor?
Hang on. Okay.
You're repeating arguments already been made. It's what grounds in planning terms are you seeking deferral?
To see if we can negotiate to get some of the low cost housing in there. At the end of the day, they're holding a bullet to our head. And can we not use the 3 years grace that we have, or through the S106, to use that time to negotiate? And also, I will say, they've had that contaminated land for X number of years. And we have been faced with nutrient neutrality and other parameters. Maybe they don't want to clean it up. I don't know. But surely clarification on those issues alone is enough to have deferment, surely. We're not closing, we're asking them to negotiate with us.
We've had our appointed viability consultant go through the figures, and as Officer Debbage has said, he's looked at that, he's come to his own conclusions. He kind of broadly agrees with the assumptions that it's not viable to provide any affordable housing. So to redo that, we kind of it may almost seem a bit of a pointless exercise, because we're going to come back to a similar view that it's not financially viable. The point I was trying to make a while ago was that if they still come back and say it's not viable, are there any other things they could offer instead to help get something on that site to deliver the public benefit of affordable housing in Holt? Because as a portfolio holder for housing has said, it's one thing to take the money, it's another thing to find the site to build the houses on. And actually, if we can find a solution that helps build those houses on this site using the monies we received from other means, this might be a way of delivering public benefit. Otherwise, we'd have to buy a site for at significant cost, plus then build those houses. So it's trying to think creatively. Can Hopkins Homes work with us to find a solution to get something that ordinarily we wouldn't get? So in many ways, the members may have to, a committee may have to agree the findings of our viability assessor to then have that negotiation about what else can we get on the site. Maybe not articulating very clearly, but it's about understanding what else can we get in the public benefit that we're not going to get with 0% affordable housing.
Officer Arson.
Chairman, a bit of helpful advice for members, perhaps through you. Where we have complex proposals to be drawn up, we've had a debate, we have a proposer and seconder. What may be helpful to the proposer and seconder is to discuss the terms precisely for the deferral and to return after a short adjournment with those points to be clearly articulated for the vote. So we've got complete clarity on why the deferral is being brought forward. Officers can assist if required in any of those discussions, but we may possibly consider adjourning for 5 to 10 minutes to allow the proposer and seconder to have that opportunity to discuss the precise terms of the reasons for the deferral. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's very useful advice, because I am still unclear as to the exact grounds for deferral, and we have to be absolutely clear in this. You know, we may be defending this at an appeal. We cannot go into that with vague ideas. We have to be absolutely clear. So I will take Councillor Owson's advice. We will take a 10-minute break now, and if the proposer and seconder would like to clarify in that time the exact reasons in planning terms for deferral, we will come back on a very short feedback, and we will then go to vote. So,
just one point of clarification. It was mentioned about rerouting some of the money that you get under the Section 106 agreements for offsite affordable housing. I have looked at the 2014 agreement, that was the North Walsham agreement, and they normally say that if the sites, the money towards will have to go into the town itself where the development took place. However, if there's no suitable sites can be found, it goes into the adjoining parishes and then district wide. So it's not impossible to reroute, for example, money allocated for North Walsham into the Holt area, but it would be very, very difficult to do so.
very briefly, sir.
All I would say is, how can we justify to those people why we're moving the money from those communities?
Can I just clarify? We have £720,000 of Section 106 commuted sums for affordable housing from the Hopkins development, the previous Hopkins development in Holt. So there is money from Holt to be used in Holt.
Thank you. We will adjourn until past. Please come back with some And we're approaching a vote on proposal to defer pending some clarification of the grounds for that deferral. Do we now have those grounds, Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think looking at it, the break was very constructive. And I think a very pertinent point has been added to the deferral proposal in the fact that can we not go back to them and ask them to look at the mix of housing? Because at the end of the day, if it's just going to come down to cost, they're already working on site. There is plenty of mixed housing within the site already. And surely a proposal from us to them to go back, review, and look at the mix of housing would be a major step forward, and we may get something out of that. And I think that with the other reasons that they say were not, should we say, solid concrete, but should we could say ancillary or to be clapped on, I think that would make the grounds for deferment a lot better from a legal basis as well. But it also shows that we still want to negotiate and not fire shots over an open void. And maybe I can ask for my seconder to expand on that as well.
Could I bring Officer Ryerson in first?
As you request, I'm not here to intervene in that discussion in any way. I've just received an email and I've been informed by Mr. Lieberman that in fact Hopkins would be willing to support a deferral to enable further discussion. So I think that's very positive news, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that may very quickly then, Brown.
Yes, I was just going to say exactly that. The second reason would be to leave the door open for further negotiations and to perhaps get a little bit more information. I understand, you know, the independent advisor has obviously had information passed to him. He's made the decision on what is before him. My concern is that he may not have the full picture. And if we defer, and it would seem that the applicant, the penny has dropped. Can I put it that way with the applicant, having just heard what is in the email recently arrived, that we appear to be on the same page in that respect, both you know, this committee and the applicant.
Yes, equitable compromise is always best. Are you happy with that? Yeah.
The question about looking at the mix of the housing, I suppose that's something we need to understand. What is it in the mix that you're looking to achieve? Because it's probably worth stating that the actual mix is based on what was submitted back in December 2020, or was at committee in 2020, and that had a housing mix that was linked to the affordable housing that was going to be provided at the time. So it has a range of mix that's helping to meet local needs that was identified. So if we change that mix, there's a danger we end up changing it to a mix that doesn't meet the local needs and becomes harder for us to then to buy those properties as part of the 106 monies from on the Cromer Road site. So just going to clarify exactly, and I don't know whether you want to ask Officer Debbage just to give a view on the housing mix, because actually she's got the best understanding of what the local needs are in Holt for housing sizes.
Indeed, that would be useful.
It's an interesting point. So as Jeff says, the mix includes the 23 affordable housing that were basically according to our needs analysis. That means it probably contains a mix that is not what Hopkins would have wanted to build if they were looking at 52 market homes, because, for example, we suggest quite a lot of 1-bedroom homes to meet the local need for 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. If left to their own devices, I would imagine that Hopkins would have built more larger family homes because there's a greater profit margin on those. So it kind of works both ways. If we looked at altering the mix, it is quite possible that we could do a different mix that was more viable. Not delivering, I would imagine, 45% affordable housing. It's something that may be able to deliver by its own volition, some affordable housing. However, as Jeff said, the counter to that is if there is a way of working with the developer and a registered provider to get grant funding for some of those units, you would want the mix of the 23 that we proposed in the first place. But I guess it could be a reason for discussion around that mix. What the right answer is, it's difficult to say at this stage.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's time to put this one to bed. So we will vote on the proposal to defer. Yeah. It was, yes, we will vote on the proposal to defer as proposed by Councillor Pearce, seconded by Councillor Brown. Usual roll call, please.
Councillor Brown,
For.
Councillor Blathwaite,
For.
Councillor Butikofer, Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett, Councillor Heinrich,
Abstain.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor Kershaw,
For.
Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Pearce,
For.
Councillor Taylor,
Yes.
Councillor Toy,
Against.
and Councillor Withington. So that is 6 votes for, 5 votes against, and 2 abstentions. The vote is carried.
Right. Over to officers now to negotiate. Yes, Wendy.
Terribly sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering if I can be part of those negotiations and the portfolio holder for planning, please. Thank you very much.
Chairman, we can have a reporting mechanism back to the portfolio holders and we will liaise before we enter those discussions. If meetings need to be engaged where elected members are involved, obviously, we will discuss that with those members concerned.
Thank you.
Can we ask, I mean, can I just ask for confirmation that this application will then come back to committee once you've done your negotiations?
Through you, Chairman, this item's referred under the powers of the Assistant Director, and if I'm still here as your Assistant Director at that time, then I will be asking for it to be.
Well, can we make it a condition of that deferral then, please, that it comes back to committee?
Chairman, I think that we will be liaising with the portfolio holders if we arrive at a situation where there is no possible positive outcome, then of course that will need to come back to committee. If we're in a situation where there is a positive outcome around the recommendation, then that would otherwise be supported by the elected members through their portfolio holders. If there is a concern from those portfolio holders that it should come back to committee, or indeed the elected members of the ward, then there will be liaison at that point.
Thank you. So it could be referred back to committee regardless.
I'm hearing, Chairman, there is a strong preference. If I'm here as your Assistant Director, then I will be bringing it back to the committee in all possible circumstances.
Yeah, I think it would be important for any compromise to be discussed in full again. So let us move on then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I ask what kind of time frame we're looking at? Because we've got the elections coming up, and obviously I'm not standing again, and I would very much like to see this resolved. So is there a chance this will happen before the elections? Thank you.
Yeah, 2 more meetings, remember.
Chairman, there is no time frame given in the reason to defer. We will try to bring it back at the first available opportunity, and obviously bear due reference to the fact that we have an elected group of members who've passed a vote to defer. I can't say for sure that we'll be able to do that because there may be positive discussions that are taking a little longer. What we will do is we'll continue to keep portfolio holders and ward members updated as to where we stand on those matters. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I think the committee would be grateful if that could be expedited so that it does come back. It's the latest in April. It's our final meeting of this group. Let us move on then, given the time is vanishing, to item 9, West Runton PF/22/1337. redevelopment of site to include pitch surface improvements, creation of service pitches, erection of site managers, bathroom utility pods, creation of multi-use games area, children's play area, associated fencing, upgrading motor van waste and service points, extension of internal road network, all at Inkleborough Fields, Caravan Club site, West Runton. Right. You're doing a slide, right? When you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. It's application reference PF/221337 Inkleborough Fields Caravan Club site, Station Close, West Runton, is on page 37 of the agenda. The proposal involves installation of all-weather service and premium pitches, a new play and multi-use games area, 2 site managers, bathroom utility pods, and a new service and motor van waste points. The site within the red line comprises of 21 acre, 241 freehold pitches within Inkleborough Fields Caravan and Motor Home Club. The site comprises mostly of grass pitches, but also has a small number of serviced and hard standing pitches, 10 pitches, as well as small seasonal storage compound. Inkleborough Fields Caravans Club and Motorhome sites lies within the countryside, Norfolk coast area of stunning natural beauty, undeveloped coasts, wooded glacial, rich and coastal shelf landscape character areas, and West Runton Conservation Area. Inkleborough Hill County Wildlife Site is located adjacent to the northeast boundary of the sites, and Town Hill lies along the southwest boundary of the site. Access is provided off Station Roads and through Station Close to the northwest of the red line, which is illustrated by the photographs 1 to 4. The northern area of the site, which can be seen on the proposed site plan on the image to the right, will accommodate 2 site manager bathrooms and kitchen utility pods, motor van waste points, universal service points, all-weather pitches, and service pitches. The area to the east of the proposed plan will comprise of premium pitches, non-owning all-weather pitches, and the extension of the internal road network. And the area to the south of the proposed plan will accommodate the play and multi-use games areas. The 2 site managers' bathrooms and kitchen utility pods are located within the orange circle, and an image illustrating their location in the site can be seen on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. These pods consist of a bathroom and a small kitchen washing up and storage area. They are clad in vertical brown composite UPVC, synthetic rubber roof with grey UPVC fascia, and anthracite grey UPVC doors and window. The 2 motor van waste points are located within the orange circle. They comprise of 2 outlets for black waste with manholes, open grill located in the center of manholes, and 2 1.3 meters high bollards with tap and lights and integrated galley. 1 universal service point is located within the orange circle. It comprises of 5 service units with 3 bollards and tap and water, along with gully, with a 1 meter high brown plastic composite rail fencing. Around the location of the orange circles are situated 10 all-weather pitches measuring 9 by 9. Their surface will have crushed stone chippings and treated timber gravel boards around their perimeter. Each pitch will be separated by 3 meters of grass. Around the location of the orange circle, which can be seen on the image located on the bottom right corner of the slide, 30 service pitches measuring 9 by 9 meters will be proposed. These pitches will have 1 meter high bollards with a single tap and lights and gully. The surface of the pitches is crushed stone chippings with treated timber gravel board around the perimeter. 3 premium pitches measuring 9 by 11 meters are located within the red circle in the plan. Each pitch will have an integrated bollard with single tap and gully, a standard barbecue station, and a picnic bench with umbrella on solid concrete slabs. The surface of the pitches will comprise of crushed stone chippings with timber gravel board around the perimeter as well. So the pitches have a 5 meter separation finger and hornbeam or beech hedge at 1.7 meters high to add further privacy. 9 non-awning pitches measuring 6 meters by 9 meters are located within the red circle, along with an extended road with turning area. The pitches will be separated by 3 meters of grass, and its surface will comprise of the same surface materials of the previous pitches. The location of the play area and multi-games areas are highlighted in reds. The play area will be securely fenced with 2 access and exit gates. It will include a 2.4 meter cone climber, 1 modular tower system, and 2 timber swings. The multi-use games area will be constructed including a permeable tarmac surface together with a 2.4 meters fencing to suitably enclose the play area. This slide is a reminder of the main issues for consideration. And it is recommended that the application be approved subject to conditions relating to matters listed in the officer reports and any other considered necessary by the Assistant Director for Planning, which is set out on page 56 of the agenda. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have no Dana Parish speaker, there's no objecting speaker, no supporting speaker. I believe you're the local member, sir.
Good morning, members again. I think you are all very, very clear on my thoughts on the AONB and the force on us to protect that area against development. And I think you could be mistaken in thinking, well, this is already quite a large caravan and camping site. And it is, it's 241 pitches already. That's huge for a tiny village. That's almost as many houses as are in the village. The impact that campsite has on local residents is what really, really concerns me, apart from my AONB concerns. And I note that the National Trust have said they are not happy, they are concerned about this application. Can we bring up again the photos of the entrance to this site? Because I think it's really, really important to understand here. I mean, frankly, if I'd ever sat on the first application for this site, I wouldn't have allowed it. There. So, Highways have said that they're happy with the entrance from the main road onto the site. I can deal with that. I would say go visit on a Saturday and wait and see what happens between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, because that becomes impassable. They queue to get onto the site because, as you can see, the entrance onto the site there is incredibly narrow. And it's impossible to pass. So people coming off the site have to be off by 12. And then the people coming onto the site can't go on before 1. What happens? They queue because they want to make sure they get the best pitch. Who can blame them? They're on holiday. They want to get the best value for their money. There's a video on the internet of a caravan and camping club member who's moving from one site in Sandringham over to this site, who says how difficult it is to access this site and how you have to queue and how you have to take into consideration that during your drive to the campsite, you're going to pass over one of the fairways. So you're lucky because the golf players are nice and they'll be careful for you. The other thing that worries me is this site at the moment largely reverts to grass, and there isn't much to see during the winter months when the leaves are off the trees. The new development will change that because, again, we're putting down chippings that will be seen in the landscape. We're putting up fences. We're putting in large pieces of play equipment. This campsite already contributes heavily to the local economy. That cannot be denied. But I really think the impact that it will have on the housing and on the environment, we are building on areas. I mean, one of the things the National Trust talks about is the infilling of areas between each other and each other's village. And the wayfare, then the routes that wildlife can take to get from one area to another. This is an area rich in wildlife. We've just seen what happens when we cut down on wildlife areas on the edge of Cromer and how people feel about us not protecting that area. There are people, if you look at these pictures, there's some houses here, they can't go out of it. I don't think that's the right photo there, but if you, where's the, you got the road one? I think it's near the front of your presentation. There. You can see, if you look between points 1 and 2 on that map, that looks like that's a double track road. It's not a tracked road, it's a byway. It's a byway. The road is fine up until, from the main road there, as you can see in picture 1, up until the clubhouse, but then it changes into this single track. And on that single track, those people in those bungalows are effectively trapped in their homes on a Saturday because of the way people try and drive up and down there. I've written to the Caravan Camping Club as the local member on several occasions, asking them to look at monitors, look at speed restrictions on that piece of road, anything to make the lives of those people better, because it is really difficult for them. So anything that increases on this site, both from a point of view of the right to enjoy public, the right to enjoy their homes, amenity value, I believe that's EN4, was it? Excuse me, looking at my notes. Yes, EN4. I believe that impacts those residents, and I also believe it's contrary to our policies for the AONB. So I would ask the committee to refuse this application, please, or convince me otherwise that this is acceptable, because I'm not convinced it is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I, my understanding and knowledge of this site says that these proposed new supposedly hard standing areas are simply updating of existing hard standing. So it's not a new development, it's an improvement. Am I correct on that?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. I would just point out as a club member that in terms of getting onto sites, the club is getting particularly vigilant now on getting people off sites by 11 and not allowing anybody on site till 1, and making it very clear that it should be, if you're going to arrive before 1, you should be parked in a lay-by somewhere until such time as you can get on the site. You can't enforce that, but you know that is what it creates clearly on the club website, in the club handbook, and I've had to do that myself.
Mr. Chairman, they could stick a warden down there.
I know.
You know, and
worth suggesting.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just stating that there is a position on that which is not enforceable. I know, but so who wishes to have a go at this one then? Angie.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I speak as Vice Chairman of the Norfolk Coast Partnership, and I see from the report that we have neither an objection or a support to this application. Now, as a holiday area, a tourist area, we are in many cases a victim of our own success. And I see that really highways don't have any particular objection to this either. And I'm very relieved to hear what you have just said about the site timing when people leave and come in. I know this site. I have actually used it once, but that was about 20 years ago. So I don't think I need to declare an interest in that. It is well sited within the landscape. It is a lovely site. And I think the Caravan and Motorhome Club, as they call themselves these days, provide some excellent facilities, and I'm glad to see that they're improving them. So I am more than happy to propose that we accept this.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. That's Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to mention that if you've got 240 pitches, that's about 55,000 miles a week. That's quite a lot of carbon that's being used in this particular campsite. I'll just throw that out. If you looked at those photographs of those lovely grassy, swathes that Is that, you said you were just replacing existing hard standing, but it looked as if most of the existing caravan park was grass. Is that not correct?
So most of the caravan park is grass. There is some hard standing pitches
Right, okay, that's fine.
already. And most of those grass pitches have pollards with electricity.
Okay, otherwise, I'd just like to echo what the National Trust says actually in terms of the damage to the environment of this intensification of the site, and agreeing with councillor Bidockerfer again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask, really, National Trust and Norfolk Wildlife Trust object on very strong grounds, and one of our core policies is to protect our area of outstanding national beauty. We are a holiday tourist economy. We are a victim of our own success and the desire to sample these green and pleasant lands. But does this not conflict with a major core of our policy to protect our ANOB and our heritage? Surely by doing what's happening to this site, you're going to damage an awful lot of green, an awful lot of environment, an awful lot of the views, and an awful lot of the amenities that the locals who live there would wish to keep and access themselves.
My understanding is it's merely improvements and not extension or anything. However, others would like to comment.
I mean, had we been considering a proposal to add additional plots over and above what's being proposed? Clearly, that would be a different planning consideration. But what we're talking about here is enhancements and developments of the existing site. We're not adding additional caravan pitches, and that's a difference of position in terms of planning assessment. Yes, we have to make sure we respect our policies and make sure we adhere to those policies, but whilst there may be consultees objecting on grounds, there are also consultees that are in support of this and aren't objecting. So we have to sort of take a balanced approach to that. Your landscape officer isn't objecting to this proposal. So I think it's in the round, I think it's enhancing a tourism offer to our district. Yes, we have a responsibility to manage the impacts of tourism. I know the National Trust are concerned about additional people on Inverbury Hill. But it's about enhancing the tourism offer, which is part of the public benefit of this particular scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Toy, I'll come back to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, where to start? In fact, Officer Lyons, Jeff just said about impacts of tourism. The reality of this, whilst they are improvements, it will be an intensification. I am a caravan owner, but I'm not a member of this club and I don't use this site. But what happens is the more of the hard standings they have, the more it will get used throughout the year. And in this particular area, in the AONB, where wildlife would normally have an opportunity to recover, there is a danger that by having the hard standings, where people will now come along with their motorhomes and the caravans, because it's not a camping site, it's a motorhome and caravan site, they will be coming there more periods throughout the year, using areas that were grass before that they wouldn't have used. They'd have gone to the hard standings. And there's a danger that we're going to upset the wildlife in that area. And I think we need to consider whether that's been balanced appropriately, because it will be an intensification. And also, during the summer, people tend to come for a week's holiday. Other times of the year, they will come for shorter periods, which means the residents nearby are disrupted more days. So I get the arguments, but I do have concerns at this stage, and I'd like to hear what others have to say. But I do have concerns at this stage that we've not necessarily got the balance right regarding this application.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the conditions, you probably see there's a long list of suggested conditions, and condition 11 does talk about sort of restricting the time of the year when the site can be used. So that should in many ways go to assuage any concerns about intensification, because they're having to work within that time period. So
Yeah.
you can't, they're not adding pictures, so they can only have the maximum number of pictures between that time frame. And that's, and I understand that's what's currently operating on the site at the moment, so.
Yeah, but it's where they're going to put those pictures. If they're spread over a bigger area now, then, you know, if before they had so many pictures they could use so many times a year because they were hard standards and the grass ones were left, they may now have people spread more across the site. We don't know that. Just because we've restricted the time, we don't know the place they've restricted it to. I'm not saying that that's not true, and I know, except we've got the condition there. It's how in reality, how will it affect wildlife? And I don't know the answer. I'm just questioning that as part of the planning balance, whether we've got that right. So
Could we just confirm, so everybody's clear on this, Bruno, that the number of pictures remains exactly the same? There is no increase in hard standings, they are merely being improved, and the number of grass pitches remains the same. Is that correct?
So the grass pitches, they'll be upgraded to hard standing.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
No, it's ones that are.
So from the 241 pitches existing on the site, only 53 will be upgraded. So that's 1/5 of all the pitches on the site. And the images you see here of the proposed plan, we need to have in consideration the scale that that proposed plan is. The site is 21, it's over 20 acres. So it's a large site. And the largest area that will have the upgrades, it's at the entrance of the site where already there is some upgrades already in some of the grass pitches that have been done previously. The other upgrades are on the so the largest area, as I said before, of upgrades, it's at the entrance of the site, as you can see on that first area to the north. So there is already hard standing pitches there. All the other pitches will be, grass pitches will be upgraded to hard standing. Then you have a small portion of grass pitches on the proposed plan on the east side of the proposed plan. And then you just have the play area to the south. So it is the largest upgrades are at the entrance of the site. Okay.
Yeah. That's Kershaw.
Looking at the conditions that have been applied to this gives me some comfort. From portfolio holder of sustainable growth, obviously I support tourism and the income that it will generate. I do think it complies with SS5 and SS2. I'm also very pleased to see here that there is a motor van waste point. This is something that we have a crucial need for in the area. We have a real problem with vans just putting waste into what they think are sewerage at places like Walcott, where it goes straight onto the beach. And we need more of this provision, and it's good to see a site provide that. From the National Trust point of view, I find this quite strange because I live here, as we all do, and I find that the traffic entering and leaving the National Trust sites is far more problematic than the caravan sites. And as they've started implementing parking charges, people park all over the roads around the sites now. So for them to complain about this in a site which is contained, I find slightly perplexing. That's already all I've got to say on the matter. But I think to see this as an improvement, I do see it as an improvement, and it's been an established site for a long time. So that's why I'm happy to second.
You want to come back, Sarah?
Yes, please. I mean, we say it's not an intensification. Somebody who comes with a tent and puts up a tent on a piece of grass then leaves the area pretty much as they left it when they go. Those pitches won't be used when the weather is too inclement because they won't be able to, because who wants to put their bed down on a muddy field? But these are allowing more vans into the site. And this is my concern. These vans that go in and out, the weight of them, there's no provision in here for the returning of these pitches Could we, if we're going to have to accept this, could we say to them, rather than using chippings, I believe on one of the other applications in the site, in the area, the other site, there's another caravan and camping club site that comes sort of down from the north, this site nearby. And to make sure the land went back as close as possible to nature, if you like, we asked them to use the mesh in the ground so that the grass could grow through it, so that it looks far more natural during the periods when there isn't. I think that's a perfectly reasonable request. It doesn't defer my fears about the intensification on the site and the vans now going past these houses rather than cars. But I do accept that we already have a lot of people on that site. And I do accept the argument from Councillor Kershaw about the waste points. That is incredibly important to us in this area, the number of people that use the wrong locations for disposing. So I'm not sure I can support, but I think I would find it far more acceptable if we are able to return the area back to a normal wild location during the winter months.
Councillor Holiday, you've had one go. So
And then just a quick question there. Is the waste point going to be open to non-residents?
They're not usually, has been my comment as a member. Councillor, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on this. I'm encouraged that the Caravan and Camping Club are actually applying for a planning permission and are not deciding this themselves as a planning authority themselves. I believe they should be encouraged to use the local planning authority rather than change the site into a site for rallies under temporary holiday site permissions. So though I am cynical about some of this application, I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have proposed. Yeah, go ahead.
Just picking up in response to the surfacing question. I mean, looking through the conditions, I'll just need to check whether there's any plans that specifically refer to the surfacing details, but we could impose a condition to agree the final surfacing of those pitches with the intention of making them so they're less conspicuous in a sort of wider environment. So we could have that as a condition if members felt that was important to address the visibility concerns that you're. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so the proposal to go with the officer recommendation proposed by Councillor Fitch-Tillett and seconded by Councillor Kershaw. We can do the usual roll call, Lauren.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Blathwaite. Councillor Butikofer. Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Toy.
For.
And Councillor Withington. For. That's 12 votes for, 1 against, the vote is carried.
Thank you, that is approved. Ah, right. Only if you're going to ask lots of questions on appeals and management performance. Okay, if we can move to development and performance, please, Jeff.
It's not shit, honest. Right, I'll keep this fairly brief because I'm conscious of the time. So performance, page 63. So I've set out the performance for the month of 31st of Jan. We didn't have any major decisions issued, but we had 108 non-majors. We get over 96% within time, and the 24-month average. Both of those have increased. So little green pointy arrows going upwards just to help you there, which is good. So our performance
see.
is improving on those, which is good. And again, I've listed a number of applications we had registered and validated within the month. And yeah, we'll come on to appeals in a minute. And if Fiona wants to go on to section 106 obligations, there's a few more added to the list that you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are just asked to note the agenda item 10. Are we content to note? Yeah. Thank you. That's 106s.
Yes, good news. Norfolk County Council and Hethel are signing the Scotto Enterprise Park 1, so yeah, it's good. And that's very pleasing. I think Rob Young's very pleased about it to help promote enterprise and that. So with substantial agreement on the Chris Malting section 106 agreement as well. Yeah, that's about it. And we're still waiting for the draft section 106 unilateral undertaking on the Hindle Western Road one, and despite the applicant assuring us that they can move very quickly to deliver an agreement there. We're still waiting for the draft. A month later, we would have had a draft out by now, but I'm not going to comment further on that. But that's everything on the 106s. So very positive on Swift Air one.
Chair, if I may comment, the passing of the 106 for Scotto, thanks to Fiona's really hard and dogged work, it needs to be pointed out that the implication of this is far greater than just an S106. This has meant that Standard Gas have taken a lease on one of the other aircraft units, so that the pyrogenesis machinery that Swift Air have built can be put into there. This device generates hydrogen and it is phenomenal. It burns waste. It doesn't burn, it bakes waste with no emissions, produces hydrogen. From that hydrogen, because that can now be done, the RAF have now funded Swift Air to produce trainer aircraft built from hemp resin and are going to be powered by aluminium air batteries that are going to be made by the hydrogen on Scotto site. This is all made in North Norfolk. This is a phenomenal story, and Fiona has unlocked it.
Excellent. That's amazing news. How we're getting the high-tech industries we need. Any more comments? Yes, Councillor.
I don't really understand the regulation. So why would just say.
Your name, Peter Cush.
You're in the red for Scotland.
We were.
But we're just saying it's a very good news story. So, yeah, it's further down, there's the.
Should we to explain if you.
Approved, you know, and it didn't agree. I certainly, as local member, haven't approved that.
Receive instructions on the 106 agreements, and we have been asked to open a file on it. Officers ask us to open a file on it in anticipation.
It's ongoing, so it's in the program.
Yeah.
The best advice, because I do publish this, it's my production, this report. So if it's green, it means we're doing okay. We're not coming up to the time, because the concern is if it's taking too long, we're supposed to bring back obligations to committee to redetermine. So if it's a red, it's taking a long time, and there was a risk here. If it wasn't signed, this would come back to you for redetermination. Thankfully, we haven't got there. The orange ones, I say they've been around for a while. It was November 24th when it came to committee, the ones at crisp. So green is good, orange and red. Yeah, we're getting close to the point. It's in terms of exactly, yeah.
See, when I see now what you mean, rag rating. Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand that.
Okay, no more there. Move on to appeals. I believe there's some updates. Yeah, we've had they've been busy down in Bristol by the looks of it. We had that's a change. We actually had I didn't make that comment. We've had 5 decisions since the last time this report came back to us. I can go through the list and outline those as we go through. There's no updates I have on page 1, so it's pretty much as it is. We're still waiting for the Clyde decision. I know it's
keep popping into the press every now and then, and so yeah, we'll see what happens with that. We do have a most recent decision at Dillon, which is was a Class Q conversion of a barn to dwellings. The inspector did allow that. But it's not quite as straightforward because it is in the nutrient neutrality zone. So whilst the inspector has granted the permission, actually they can't implement it because they need to be satisfied of nutrient neutrality and GI RAMS compliance. So it's, yeah. Less said. And then on the top of page 69, we've had a decision at Edgefield for the land at top of Sands Loke. This was a dog exercise area. And there were highway concerns, and the inspector cited amenity concerns, so that was refused on those two grounds, dismissed on those two grounds. Nothing more then on to page 70. We've had a decision at Runton for the Dormy House Hotel. So the inspector has allowed the sort of large raft of extensions and alterations that came before this committee. So yeah, the inspector's taken a balanced view and thinks actually it's okay and has granted it. So you win some, you lose some. And then obviously the two on page 71. So we've had a decision at Bristol for Brambles Farm, which another one was dismissed. And for a new dwelling in Fakenham, again, nutrient neutrality affecting that decision. The inspectors couldn't make a decision on that one to approve because of nutrient neutrality. So happy to take any questions on those.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to the one at Edgefield, PF 220727. That was a refusal twice over. And I read the inspector's decision, and virtually every point made by this committee was upheld. It wasn't a suitable site. Enforcement have been informed because we're expecting that there will be continuing breaches by the landowner moving forward. But it's pleasing to see that that this committee got it absolutely right.
Any further comments? Okay, we don't need to, item 12, we don't need to exclude the press and public as we have no private business under 13 and 14 I'm aware of, unless long is going to enlighten me. Thank you. Therefore, meeting closed at 12:05. Thank you.